Past couple of days, I've cut a couple of videos. One was about uh, Macbeth as an analogy to inflation. A bit of a reach, I admit, but it was an amusing one. And the other one was about the Great Resignation. Now, I'm not entirely convinced the Great Resignation is real, or if it is real, it's not as much of an emergency as the media would have us believe. But let's pretend for a minute that it is not only real, but as much a cultural shift as the great cultural shifts of the 1940s and 1960s and 70s. Let's pretend that to be true. I made the argument that a great resignation can only happen in a time of abundance. And then it sort of dawned on me later, it's like, wait a minute, is this abundance real? Or is it artificially manufactured by the same things that are causing us to have inflation now? So I began thinking about this scenario. Inflation and the Great Resignation. Are they related? Well, one isn't necessarily causing the other. There is no causation between them. Is there a correlation? Well, they're happening at the same period of time, so there probably is something of a correlation. The Great Resignation is made possible by advances in telecommunication. And this is something that was probably inevitable. The only reason it didn't happen sooner is because the pandemic didn't happen sooner. But the pandemic accelerated the pace of innovation in the workplace. And I think work from home is here to stay, and it will only continue to spread. Particularly when employers get used to not paying for big buildings to stick workers in. Inflation, hopefully, is not here to stay. Now, what caused inflation? Well, very simply, it was caused by increasing the money supply by 25% in the year 2020. In 2020, the total amount of cash increased from $15.8 trillion to $19.8 trillion. The greatest increase was by about $3 trillion in the span of only a few months in the spring of 2020. Coincidentally, that was when the economy tanked, where the stock market went from 30,000 down to 18,000 in a few weeks, as the pandemic and the lockdowns got more severe and had a more crippling impact on the economy. Simply put, they tried the lockdowns, they broke the economy, and instead they said, well, the cure is going to be worse than the disease. Let's not do lockdowns. Let's open the economy back up and get people back to work. And they did. And how much of that played a role in the 600,000 to 700,000 people that have died of COVID? Don't know. Probably had a significant role. Well, during this time, in the span of in 2020, a massive amount of cash was injected into the economy in the form of a variety of benefits and a variety of stimulants. And that money hasn't been pulled out of the economy yet. The Democrats, strangely enough, have not been quick to embrace jacking everyone's taxes, which, by the way, is one way to counter inflation. You decrease spending, you increase taxes. Decreasing spending decreases the amount of money circulating in the economy. Increasing taxes does the same thing, pulls money out of the economy. Essentially, the things that cause inflation to abate are the things that pull money out of the economy. Other things to abate inflation are to insist that banks hoard more money in their reserves. None of these things have happened. Instead, we are faced with inflation and supply chain problems, which are not due to inflation, but they're due to conditions created by the pandemic. Well, what I think we need to do, and what I think needs to be done and what I don't think will be done, is the following. We're not going to decrease spending. The Democrats are bound and determined to pass about $3 trillion of new spending, a lot of it on want-to-haves and not need-to-haves. And they don't seem all that determined to increase taxes. They only want to increase taxes on the richest, so-called richest few people that happen to be hoarding all the cash. Well, the truth is those people will always find a way to hoard their cash, and the burden of paying for things will fall to the middle class and upper middle class. The people with enough money to afford the taxes, but not enough money to outmaneuver the taxes. And inflation will probably just run its course until the next administration. And in the meantime, the one thing that would only make this worse is if interest rates went up, which of course is one other way to attack inflation. But then you have stagflation, and that's bad.